Hi everyone, and welcome to DnD Horror Stories with DnD Doge. The stereotype of the Horny Bard is something that a lot of people in the Dungeons & Dragons fandom are keenly aware of, though that doesn't mean that all bards need to play into this trope. Though unfortunately, that is what happened in the following player's game of Dungeons & Dragons. To the post. I joined for an epic fantasy campaign. I got a bard-centric dating sim instead. By Reddit user, Salada Warrior. About 2 to 3 months ago, my friend and I joined an online game on Discord that was supposed to be a combat-heavy, story-driven Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition campaign. The Dungeon Master talked a big game about tactical combat, meaningful exploration, and long-term goals for our characters. Instead, I spent 4 sessions stuck in a starter village, watching a bard roleplay every NPC into bed, while the rest of us sat around waiting for anything to happen. The players in this story were me, female, asexual human paladin, focused on service and justice. Wizard, my in-real-life friend, played a studious human wizard. He is more of a quiet type, but extremely enjoyable to play with. Halfling rogue, nice enough, but easily distracted. Tiefling bard, self-declared lover of all things living. And our dungeon master, claimed he had 10 plus years of experience running games. Session 0. Promises, Promises. This campaign actually had a Session 0, which made what followed even more disappointing. The dungeon master gave us a decent pitch. This game will be a mix of tactical combat and world exploration, with roleplay opportunities to follow your character's personal goals. Expect 60% action, 30% travel and survival, and 10% downtime and social scenes. The DM then said, "So, what is your character's goal in this world?" We each explained what we were hoping to do with our characters long term. I wanted to make a chapel and help the poor of the land. Wizard wanted to make a magical library. Rogue wanted to make an underground black market network that connects all cities in the realm. And everyone seemed on the same page. Until the bard said he wanted to run the most famous and desirable brothel in the kingdom. The dungeon master laughed and said, "That'll be interesting. We'll make it work." People do realize that if they play a bard, they don't have to be super horny, right? Session 1. Solid start, sudden cringe. We opened with a goblin ambush on a trade route. It was cool, clean, and simple. I held the front line. The wizard tossed out some cantrips, and the bard actually used bardic inspiration like a team player. I thought maybe this will work out. We reached a small village to regroup. There, we were told a young girl had been kidnapped by goblins, which was a solid quest hook. While I was asking around, the barmaid randomly hit on my character, suggesting that we relax upstairs together, and then invited the bard to join in. It was out of nowhere, and immediately weird, especially since I had already established that my character was asexual, and not interested in relationships. I said no, both in character and out. The dungeon master just chuckled, shrugged, and moved on. Session 2. Bartering and flirting, while the plot dies. The rogue decided she needed more gear before we could pursue the goblins. Reasonable, until it turned into a 90-minute haggling scene over rope, caltrops, oil, food, and ball bearings. She asked the shopkeeper about the tensile strength of the rope, tried to haggle down rations by complaining about mold, role-played swapping lockpicks for a future favor, and asked for an artisan craft flask of oil. The dungeon master played it all out in excruciating detail. Meanwhile, the bard was back at the tavern, seducing the barmaid and getting bonus stew for being charming, and the dungeon master was loving it. The wizard and I kept trying to steer us toward the goblin camp, though the dungeon master told us, "They're still having fun. We'll get there." We never did. Sure, 90 minutes of shopping, and then another character hitting on random NPCs is really fun for the other players at the table. Session 3. Interrupted Plans and Unwanted Propositions. 3 sessions in, and we're still in the same village. I finally found a scout NPC who had seen goblin tracks in the forest, and started planning a mission with him. I was genuinely excited. Finally, a moment to actually do something productive. Then, the bard wandered into the scene, and, as usual, tried to seduce the NPC mid-conversation. The scout, apparently swayed, turned to me and said, "Maybe we could talk strategy over drinks. You, me, and your gorgeous friend here." The dungeon master laughed. The bard laughed. I sat there stunned. I said I wasn't interested, in character and out, and tried to steer things back to the actual mission. The wizard made an excuse to leave early, and disconnected from the session, and then messaged me privately. "I'm seriously considering leaving. This is going nowhere, and the DM seems to only care about the bard and his cringe flirts." I convinced him to hang on for one more session, saying that maybe now that we have the scout, we have no reason to stay, and will be able to follow the lead. Though I wish I hadn't. Session 4. Brothel Investigation. We were still in the same town. The bard suggested we investigate the local brothel for quote-unquote clues about the kidnapped girl. Yes, seriously. The dungeon master, of course, went along with it, and gave a full monologue describing the velvet curtains, the diverse cast of workers, and the various theme rooms. The bard invited all of us to join, though we all refused. I said, "We already know where the goblins are located. We have a guide and gear, and there is literally no reason to delay the mission more. And if we waste any more time, the girl will probably die." The rogue and the wizard agreed, and I asked the bard to please just come with us and do the quest now that everything is ready, and made more arguments to just go do the job, until the dungeon master interrupted. "Well, since he is the only one wanting to go, I will do his scene quickly in the brothel." So, for the rest of the session, the dungeon master only roleplayed with the bard, as he flirted with brothel workers, fished for rumors in pillow talk, and made vague innuendos about unlocking hidden plot lines. The rest of us, me, the wizard, and the rogue, just sat there, muted, waiting, doing nothing. After the session, the wizard and I left the group, and Rogue messaged me that she left a few sessions after, saying that the bard got weird toward her character too. Well, that isn't surprising, as she was a female player at the table, and I don't blame OP or their friend for leaving either, as you can tell how a game is going to be after 4 sessions, and they could tell that this wasn't the game for them. I mean, I would have been getting frustrated at the lack of progression at this point too. If it was just that, it being a somewhat cringe table, whatever. Though the reason I'm posting this is that a few weeks ago, the tiefling player messaged me, since apparently we are still in one of those random looking for player servers in Discord with thousands of people, and this allowed him to direct message me, since I only blocked the DM and not him. And he said that he and the dungeon master were trying to make my character stop being asexual, because they thought it was kinda stupid and unrealistic for any creature to not have sexual desires, and explained that they loved my tough, tall mommy vibes from the character. Well, that's not at all creepy. And that after I left, my character changed religion and became a priestess of the god of love, and he had tons of not safe for work art he commissioned and wanted to share to all the players that played in the campaign. Apparently, the campaign kept going with new players. The art was mostly of my character dominating him in a threesome with the barmaid, one with the scout, and another art with random NPCs where she broke their chastity belts using her bare hands. Well, that's a bit disturbing. to use a player's character that quit the campaign in that way. And I'm gonna say, sure, commissioned. Right. Apparently, the rogue and wizard were not spared from the not safe for work treatment, and also got those weird arts. We immediately blocked and reported him to the server's administration for harassment. TLDR. Dungeon Master promised a game full of combat, adventure, and goal-driven story arcs. What we got was 4 sessions, stuck in a town, watching a bard roleplay every NPC into his bed, while the Dungeon Master encouraged it. The rogue bartered for rope and caltrops for over an hour, and the wizard and I left when it became clear that the only real plot was build a brothel, the campaign, and later received weird private messages from the bard. Well, that story went from cringe to flat out disturbing. I mean, it's bad enough that OP and their friend had to sit through 4 sessions of basically just the bard trying to make Dungeons & Dragons into his personal sex fantasy, with the Dungeon Master going along with it for some weird reason. But then to have said bard player start spamming the other players that left with quote-unquote commissioned art pieces of their characters and sexual situations just ups that cringe factor to 11. Here's hoping that OP, their friend, and the rogue player can find a new game with more adventuring and actually playing, rather than someone's personal sexual fulfillment. But with that said, let's get into the next D&D horror story, where a dungeon master has a weird way of trying to impress a member of the opposite sex. To the post. Dungeon Master made my monk go berserk. By Reddit user Kamikana. When I was a teen, I, 16-year-old female at the time, joined my first RPG/Dungeons & Dragons campaign ever, with a dungeon master in his 20s. I made a forest elf monk who had a very peaceful personality, only used violence as a last resort, liked children and animals, blah blah blah. On the first or second session, I found a potion quote-unquote beckoning to me. Admittedly, I was given the option to drink it or not, but I could obviously tell that the Dungeon Master wanted me to do it, so I did. It turns out that the potion unlocked a quote-unquote berserk mode in my character. Every time that I failed an attack, not crit fail, it was any fail, I would have to roll a successful wisdom saving throw or enter this mode. It basically made me super strong and violent, like a barbarian's rage, except I couldn't choose to dispel it without another successful saving throw. If there weren't any enemies around, I would just start attacking allies. This obviously kept happening for a few sessions, and it was quite frustrating. I tried to look for a cure to no avail. Cut to a few sessions later, the party was investigating a werewolf den. The werewolves came out, and we started fighting them. I failed to save, and went berserk. At first, the Dungeon Master was letting me describe the actions myself, but on this occasion, he just took control of my character. He made me go into the den and took my character to the room where the werewolves stashed all of their kidnapped victims. He then proceeded to vividly describe my very peaceful monk being overtaken by this blinding rage and tearing multiple women and children apart, and I could do little about it or control it in any way, except for some saving throws. This was a whole cutscene after the monk got to the victims, by the way. It wasn't as if the DM was bothering to give me the chance of making a saving throw before each attack. Being a newbie, I remember leaving that session feeling awful, but couldn't pinpoint that it wasn't supposed to happen like this. I talked to the Dungeon Master about it, said it made me uncomfortable and disheartened about the character, and the cherry on the cake was that he said he was trying to impress me. He made all those gruesome descriptions of violence because he had a crush on me and wanted me to think he was cool. Obviously, making my first ever character go through a load of trauma that went against everything he was supposed to represent wasn't the way to go. Luckily, 16-year-old me was wise enough to leave the campaign and cut ties. The only wisdom saving throw that I succeeded in Well, it's bad enough that the Dungeon Master concocted a way to take control away from OP's character on a regular basis, and was doing so to try and impress her. But then you have to remember that she was 16 at the time, and he was in his 20s. So I guess the DM was rolling for statutory. It is good that OP had a good enough head on her shoulders to see how creepy this was, and nope out of that situation. I mean, even if it was age appropriate, I'm pretty sure that describing brutal scenes of violence is not a great way to woo a girl. Now, before we move on, I think we need to cleanse ourselves of the cringe that we were just subjected to. And to help us with that, here's Ziggy with some words of wisdom.
Don't be like the DM in that last story. Also, like and subscribe.
Such a wise kitty he is. Also, if you would like to help out more directly with the Kitty Treat Fund, as always, I'll have the Ko-fi and Ko-fi links in the description. And if you happen to donate, I'll be sure to read your message in a video. But with that, it looks like we have time for one more D&D horror story, in which a dungeon master wants their friend to tone down his silliness for a serious themed tabletop RPG, only for it to blow up in their face. To the post. Politely asked player to tone down the silliness. He rage quits and calls me ableist. By Reddit user Creative Okra 7898. I have a longtime friend who is a goofball, to put it mildly. He knows I've been into RPGs for a long time, and has been trying to play with me for the last few years, all attempts being a bit disastrous. The first attempt, he doesn't pay attention and makes jokes the entire time. The second attempt, he quits the week before the first session. Third attempt, he quits hours before the first session. Fourth attempt, he shows up to 2 sessions, argues with the dungeon master about the lore, randomly decides that his character is racist against gnomes because another player is playing a gnome, then gets sick and announces he is quitting the campaign. For some reason, he believed if he missed 1 session, he would be kicked out, so he just preemptively quit. I know saying all this makes him sound bad, and it makes me sound monumentally stupid for giving him a 5th chance. That's because I am monumentally stupid. There's an RPG I've been wanting to start a campaign of for a while, and he knows this. Once I finally got the chance to start it, I told him, but I emphasized, hey, this is going to be a serious horror campaign. I know you feel bad about messing up all the other times you tried to play, and I want to give you another chance, but you need to be sure that you are ready to be serious for the serious campaign. If that doesn't interest you, it is completely okay to miss out on this one, and I would rather you tell me now that you can't do it than have you drop out later. He then assures me many times that he has learned his lesson and can be serious for the serious campaign. Later, he told me he thought by being serious, I meant paying attention to what's going on. You know, the bare minimum. So, the first session, he's still being goofy. It can be kind of annoying, but whatever. We're just starting, and he's getting used to it. He asks if he's doing a good job, and I say sure, because he's giving me a look of, please give me approval. 3 sessions in, and he's still being ridiculous, making edgy jokes and taking nothing seriously. The characters take a road trip, and he spends 10 real-world minutes yelling about how he wants to stop for McDonald's, acting like a literal toddler. The other players trust him so little to talk to NPCs that, at one point, another player character put a hand over his character's mouth. Not in real life, of course, he just narrates it, to get him to stop fucking them over. He spends several minutes making loud, exaggerated noises of him, muffled screaming into his hand, to the point that I have to tell him to stop because it's making it hard to hear the other player character who's actually talking. At the end of the session, he asks the other players if he's being too annoying, in the same "please give me approval" tone. I can tell they're a little uncomfortable, but because it's not a big deal and they're nice guys, they say, oh, he's annoying, but in a funny way. I spent a while trying to think if I should bring it up to him, how I should bring it up to him, if it's even worth bringing it up at all. Clearly, the other players aren't that uncomfortable with it, or they probably would have said something at this point. So maybe I'm the problem for expecting better? This was the campaign I've been dreaming of for over a year. Maybe I'm just idealizing it too much. Of course, it's not going to be perfect. Eventually, I decide to send him a message, and I spend a good amount of time making sure it's as polite and non-aggressive as possible. I use quote-unquote I feel sentences, the Dear Man technique. Every healthy communication strategy I know, to be clear that I'm not mad at him, that this is a problem we can fix together, and I'm here to support him in making the necessary changes. At first, he responds somewhat okay. I can tell he's mad, but at least he's hearing me out. And again, I make it clear that it's not a big deal, that I'm sorry I did not bring it up earlier, and I just want this to be fun for everyone. I am pretty satisfied with the way the conversation turns out, so hooray for communication. Then, the next day, he texts me, "How are you?" And I know a shitstorm is coming, because he only ever asks me how I am if he wants to tell me about his problems. A red flag in retrospect. He says he wants me to kill off his character, and I get ready to assure him that either he can continue playing this character or the game as a whole, and we can work through this. I don't expect him to respond that he no longer wants to be friends. He says that I clearly hate him, and it's ableist of me to say that he's not being serious, because it's his mental illness's fault that he acts that way. I don't know what mental illness he thinks is causing him to make dick jokes. He then says to never contact him again, all because I asked him to tone down the craziness. Now that the shock of losing a friend has passed, and I've stopped blaming myself, it's really hitting me how absurd the entire situation is. What the actual fuck just happened? Why was I even friends with him for so long in the first place? Genuinely, what the fuck? Now, that's just ridiculous. For someone to end a friendship over being called out on behavior in a tabletop RPG is just stupid. If this dude couldn't take a game seriously that OP wanted him to take seriously, and when called out on it, accused OP of ableism, that is just really fucking stupid. And I would fetch to say that this quote-unquote friend likely wasn't that much of a friend to begin with. So it is good to hear that OP got over this douche defriending them, and is able to look back on it and realize that the trash took itself out here. And I hope that they were able to run the game that they were looking forward to running. But that is all I have for you today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and I hope that your games remain D&D Horror Story free. Until next time.